Nope. There we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Marijuana Time Show. You see, one of the keys to professional broadcasting is turning on the microphone. So less than one of you kids out there that want to see this are like, wow, that's a really glamorous job. And I want to do that. That's number one. The microphone must be on. Welcome, everyone, to the Marijuana Time Show. My name is Joe Klare. It's December 14th, 2017. We got a lot of great stories to talk with you about today, including the opposition as it is forming to Michigan marijuana legalization. As you know, I say opposition, I don't in any way want to make it sound like it's a even fight. It is not. We'll talk about that coming up. Also, new sales figures out of Colorado when it comes to recreational and medical marijuana, and authorities in California that are overseeing marijuana legalization. They're enlisting a familiar face in an effort to get marijuana businesses in touch with the state and registered with the state, because you have to do that if you have any hope of being a legal marijuana business, retail business, or medical marijuana business in many places in California. But first, of course, I have to tell you that we're sponsored. The Marijuana Time Show, that is sponsored by naturesidecannabis.com. Go check them out. They've been an awesome sponsor of the show since the beginning. Organic, all-natural pesticides. If you live in a state where cultivation is legal, whether it's Colorado or Oregon or Washington or California or wherever, you don't want to be giving and putting harmful chemicals in what you're growing. You don't want to be putting harmful chemicals on it. But, of course, you have to control pests as well, as every cultivator knows. naturesidecannabis.com. Go check them out. They can help you grow safe and poison-free and also pass regulations in your state. Most states now either have regulations on the books or regulations that are on the way that cover and deal with pesticide use with legal marijuana cultivation. naturesidecannabis.com can help you with that. Again, a proud sponsor of the Marijuana Time Show. I did not mention that you should go to marijuanatimes.org, as I do at the beginning of every episode, but you really should. marijuanatimes.org. Great articles. These videos are there as well for you to share. And our first story comes from the aforementioned marijuanatimes.org. This is a story that I wrote over at marijuanatimes.org. Opposition to Michigan marijuana legalization doesn't have a leg to stand on. It's kind of an old phrase, but a lot of the stuff that, the opposition, quote unquote, talks about is a bit old as well, a bit out of date. Last month, you may know the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol in Michigan turned in about 365,000 signatures in an attempt to get on the November 2018 statewide ballot. If successful, the measure will legalize cannabis possession, growing, and purchasing by those 21 years of age and older. The limit up there actually be 2.5 ounces, which would be the biggest in the country for recreational. Of course, there's opposition, and anytime there's opposition against medical marijuana or marijuana legalization, especially on the recreational side, because if you oppose medical marijuana, you're so marginalized at this point, as you should be, that there's no point in listening to what you're saying. But there's still a bit of a debate, if you want to call it that, about recreational marijuana. And opponents of recreational marijuana legalization, they like to list. They'll all make lists. It's very important that it seems like there's a lot of things that they say are wrong or are drawbacks of marijuana legalization. Now, if you look at these lists, like we're talking about this here in a minute, this Scott Greenlee, president of Healthy and Productive Michigan, that's a nice name, Healthy and Productive Michigan, insinuating, of course, that marijuana legalization will make you unhealthy and unproductive. In any case, these people, they like to make their list. And even if you look at the list, and even if you take at face value that all the things in the list are true, which they're not, which again we'll talk about in a minute, even if you gave them the benefit of the doubt and said all these things in this list are true, it still in no way points to why we should continue to leave marijuana prohibition in place. Because people who are advocating against marijuana legalization, they're pro-prohibition. They're saying we should leave prohibition in place. That's going to work better than legalization. But these lists they make in no way speak to that. None of it says, hey, well, the prohibition system, this is working, and marijuana legalization will make this worse, so that's why we shouldn't do it. That's why we should stick to the black market when it comes to this. Scott Greenlee, he was on some Michigan radio program. He said a lot of well, he made a list. He made the classic list. But then towards the end, they ask him about if he'll take money from opioid makers like fentanyl, and like the people who make fentanyl gave $500,000 out in Arizona to sink legalization out there. But he wouldn't rule that out. He said he would have a talk with those people, and the people that make the pills that 50 to 60,000 people overdose on every year. Those people, he don't rule out taking money from them, but he's got a problem with legal marijuana. Now he starts off like this. He says, quote, "A lot of people have talked about the tax dollars it will generate." It's fair enough so far. He continued, "As folks have found out in Colorado, the tax dollars come along with a cost." No explanation, just and. Because that's the list. You got to make the list. You can't explain every point in the list. That would defeat the purpose of the list. You have to make it and make it sound like a lot. He said the tax dollars come along with the costs, and interestingly enough, in a lot of cases, tax dollar projections and revenue projections don't quite come in where they should be. Well, that's true. A lot of projections are either higher or lower than the actuality is either higher than lower or lower than the projections. That's why they're called fucking projections. That's the point. They're projections. You don't know what's going to happen. You can't tell the future. You can't predict the future. So, well, that must mean legalization is bad. How does tax projections being off, which they're always going to be off, unless you're really lucky, how is that saying, or how does that anyway speak to how prohibition is better than legalization? Of course it doesn't. And he talks about this cost. He references the cost again later in the interview because the interviewer kind of presses him on it, like, what do you keep talking about a cost, what are you talking about? But he never quite gets to it. He continues, there's going to be a significant discussion with regard to how legalized recreational marijuana is managed in our state. There will be costs that inherently come along with that, rather it's law enforcement type costs, rather it's actual increased research costs, rather it's medical costs. I think the word he meant to use is weather, but it doesn't matter. You get his point. Law enforcement saves money because they're not chasing marijuana users and arresting them and putting them through the system. Medical costs, there's actually studies, and this is linked in the article, studies showing reduced Medicare costs in states with medical marijuana legalization and increased research costs. I thought that was a good thing anyway. I thought we want to research cannabis and see what it does. I thought that was one of the points. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, he ended up saying this. Well, Colorado's had a lot of issues, They just had their 5th year of legalized recreational marijuana, and most of what they had hoped would be the case is not the case. What does that mean? There's no explanation for that. He doesn't say. He goes on to reference some businesses having to deal with drug testing employees, and he kind of makes a reference to the increased cases of marijuana ingestion in Colorado emergency rooms, which is true. Something I've addressed on here and in print and elsewhere. A lot of it has to do with, the increased edibles. If you have a brownie laying around, maybe the kid will eat it. Maybe you're a careless parent, which, let's face it, there are a lot of them out there. Child-proof packaging, things of that nature, clearly marked edibles. It's all stuff that they're doing out there, and it's addressing the problem, which I will point out is a minuscule problem. We talk about actual numbers, not that it's not important to those parents, not that it's not scary to each individual parent who has a kid ingest marijuana, but they're not going to die. They're going to feel bad for a while. But again, as I said before, parenting has to come in somewhere when it comes to that. So that's the opposition they're looking at in Michigan. This next story comes from the cannabis.co. It's about Colorado. Cannabis sales have cooled off a little bit since the summer after 3 consecutive months of $136 million in combined recreational and medical cannabis sales. Colorado's marijuana dispensaries recorded nearly $121.6 million in sales during October, according to the cannabis extrapolations of state sales tax data made public Monday. October totals consisted of nearly $87.7 million in recreational sales and $33.9 in medical sales, million in medical sales. According to the cannabis calculations, 10 months into 2017, Colorado's cannabis retailers have tallied $1.28 billion in sales, putting the industry just shy of the full year total of $1.31 billion in 2016. They're basically pointing out that the rate of increase is dropping and has been dropping. And as I've said before on this show, a lot goes into that. A lot of it depends on the supply. There's a lot of places in Colorado that don't have any retail shops or don't have any medical shops, and if they did, obviously that number would be higher. Those people are just sticking with their dealer, whoever they usually get it from. They're going to drive 60 miles to Denver if they can just get it from the guy down the street, or the guy around the corner, or the guy they knew from high school. So a lot of that depends on, if more stores open, those sales numbers will go back up. If not, they'll settle, which I think is a shame. I don't think they've nearly tackled all of, or at least a huge, decent majority of the black market. A lot of it's still intact because people just don't have access to legal marijuana. It's not hard. You give them access to legal marijuana at a comparable price, they'll choose the legal most of the time. Anyway, last story from California. This is from SACV.com. To get new pot businesses registered with his office, Secretary of State Alex Padilla has enlisted the help of one of the most famous stoners of all time, Cheech Marin. As Marin put it himself, quote, "Who better to spread the news than Cheech?" At Padilla's request, Marin shot a public service announcement encouraging fledgling marijuana businesses to register on the Secretary of State's new website, Cannabis file. Isn't that hip? Registering with his office should be the first step for any marijuana business, followed by getting proper state and local licenses, Padilla said. Of course, then they go into who Cheech Marin is, Cheech and Chong. We all know that story. If you don't, you need to start back at square one when it comes to all that stuff. In his public service announcement, Marin is partially hidden behind a computer monitor as he answers questions from a woman wanting to start a pot business. His face isn't shown until the end of the spot, but to many viewers, the owner of the voice was clear from the beginning. Where state law requires that all businesses have to register with the Secretary of State's office. On the agency's website, users can search to find out if a business name has already been taken. 6 businesses already have Cannabis in their name, for instance. Let's try to be a little more creative. So we can stretch that out a little bit. Padilla said he met Marin at a Los Angeles restaurant a few weeks ago and asked him to help with the announcement. Marin said he was happy to assist. And Marin joked, "It knocks off a few hours of the community service I have to do." So that's awesome. You can go check out that video. As always, all these stories are linked in the description of this video, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or on marijuanatimes.org or all the other places you can find these videos. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Marijuana Times Show for December 14th, 2017. Check us out on Apple Podcasts. Search the Marijuana Times on there. Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes. I assume. In any case, go check it out if you just want the audio version of the show. Like and share these videos. As always, help us spread the truth about cannabis. We'll see you next time here on the Marijuana Times Show. Of course, thank you to NaturesideCannabis.com, organic, all-natural pesticides, and a proud sponsor of the show. Go check us out on marijuanatimes.org. Share the stories you find on there as well. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.